Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the 538 Governor's Map, the prediction and forecast that 538 has put forth and uploaded today, updated 51 minutes ago. It's 9:52 p.m. Eastern Time. So this is a very recent development, a very recent releasing of the prediction from 538, and it shows us some quite interesting and quite frankly fascinating results in some of these key battleground states. I've seen some surprises, more than most, in the governorship, more than I've seen in the Senate and House elections. I will say the House elections have definitely caught me off guard with some of the races, but then again, this is a statistical model. It's not always going to be 100% perfect, especially with 435 races. But I do applaud the 538 model for being something that is resemblant of practically every other mainstream media source or any type of election firm, even the Republican ones. 538 seems to have a very good idea, at least where the Senate stands right now, where the House stands, and where the governorship stand, and that's due to the fact that their models deal with a lot more information than simple polling data or demographic data. There's a lot that goes into this, and it is quite an interesting result. Taking a look at the governorships, we looked at the Senate elections this morning, so let's go ahead and get into it. The forecast here shows from our current map, since the 2021 elections in Virginia, the Republicans have 28 seats in the governorships. The Democrats only have 22. Now, that number was a bit different. In 2018, Democrats were at 27 to 23 in the minority. Previously, I think it was somewhere around 33 to 16 with one independent in the governorship. So looking at the forecast here, Democrats are already starting off from a better point than where they were back in 2017 going into the 2018 midterm elections, but they're defending the same exact states that they won back in 2018, but have very good possibilities at pickups depending on which race you're looking at. This map doesn't really show the shaded highlight for all of them, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at the shaded in version on yapms.com. I think this is a little bit easier to understand moving forward. I will start to use this as a means of just showing you a better version of the map. I realized that watching back my Senate video that it became a little bit difficult to sort of understand what the shadings were, who was leading in what area unless I was directly on the state. So hopefully this is better visually. So you see straight off the bat that Republicans are expected to win 27 seats and Democrats are expected to win 23. I used the lean, likely, and solid characterization utilized by 538. The tilt column comes from states that are determined to be toss-ups by the forecast, but have a candidate ahead. For instance, in Arizona, Kari Lake, the Republican, has a 55% chance of victory. Katie Hobbs has a 45% chance of victory. But because it is so close, it's rated as a toss-up, so I'm going to put it in the tilt Republican column, mainly because of the fact we know, at least from this 538 model, who is the favorite to win, so we should expect it to be the tilt result, at least based off of expectation right now. So all the states are characterized. We're not going to leave any up in the air for the toss-up column. We're going to characterize them as is, and hopefully this is the most helpful for our map. So to reiterate, 27 to 23, remind yourself that right now it is 28 to 22. That's where the current composition is on the governor map. You take a look at my projection, I actually expect it to be 27 to 23, except the only difference on this map is that Wisconsin goes blue on 538s and Arizona goes red on 538s. I have them flipped, but beyond that, there seems to be a lot of agreement here. Now, I did not make my prediction based off of 538's model. I will take it into account when I make my adjusted and updated model or prediction for the governorships on July 2nd, but I can't say that I had any type of insider or I had knowledge of what this model was going to predict, and there are some parts where you seem to see some disagreements within the map itself, but nothing super major. I'm quite happy with what I see on the governor map. A lot of this makes a lot of sense, but the surprises that I'm talking about more so come from states that I didn't necessarily expect to be competitive or states that I thought would be deemed more competitive on our map. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. Let's go ahead and analyze it and get through the individual parts of the race and pretty much just discuss practically every single race on this map beyond the solid and safe ones, but shouting out the ones that we didn't think would be solid and safe, even though they are. So we start off in Oregon, which this was actually one of the first ones that I took a look at because I always start off on the West Coast, and this was quite surprising. Oregon, I have never moved out of the likely, sometimes safe Democratic column. At one point, I had California as closer than Oregon, and arguably the numbers back then backed up my point. But it seems as if based off of expert ratings, based off of polling data, and based off election history, that Oregon is just a lean Democratic state. The Democrat has less than a 2 in 3 chance at victory. The Republican is about 3 points behind the Democrat according to the forecasted average. That's very close for a Democrat in Oregon. This is a state that voted for President Biden by over 15 points. The governorship in Oregon have almost always been competitive. You go back to 2018 and you find that Oregon was decided by 6, blue wave year, Biden plus 16 state, Clinton plus 14 state, didn't really make much sense. You go back to 2014, you find Oregon was decided by 6 again, Obama plus 15 state, Clinton plus 14 state 2 years later. You go back to 2010, Oregon was decided by 2 points, Obama plus 17 point state, goes on to be an Obama plus 15 point state. I mean, looking at Oregon, even going back to the beginning of the 21st century, the last time you find it solid blue, was in 1998. And since then, it never has been, and it doesn't look like it will be again in 2022. California, not at all surprising, solid blue. Idaho, Wyoming, solid red. Nevada, very close. Sisolak has about a 58% chance of victory. Joe Lombardo, a 42% chance. Extremely close. Arizona, this was quite surprising to me. Kari Lake, the Republican, has a 55% chance of victory to Katie Hobbs' 45%. I don't know what is driving this Republican Party increased chance at the governorship and decreased chance at the Senate election. I really don't know. I get Mark Kelly is a strong candidate, but I also think Katie Hobbs is as well. There's a reason why I have Arizona as blue. And looking at what we've seen and what we've been offered from the AZ GOP, I'm not thoroughly impressed. There could have been so many better Republican candidates in the state of Arizona, and they settled for Kari Lake, an election denier who actively called in the imprisonment of those who helped certify the election, essentially referencing Katie Hobbs. That is extreme beyond what I have ever expected to see from a traditionally moderate Arizona Republican Party, Doug Ducey, Jeff Flake, John McCain. That doesn't seem to be the party of the state of Arizona anymore, but rather a party focused on Make America Great Again, focused on President Trump, and I didn't think it would be that electable, but clearly 538 disagrees with me. The state of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy, the Republican, only has about a 70% chance of victory. Now, that's quite surprising, but I think it makes sense. Mike Dunleavy isn't popular. Bill Walker is a former governor, and there is also a Democrat in the race. By the time you reach the final map here, it is very possible that Democrats actually, or independents, end up using that ranked choice voting scenario to win the election. But of course, looking at the combined vote share, that's where you really get some good numbers, and you find that it's actually a neck-and-neck race at this point in time, with the Democrats and the independents slightly ahead. Quite fascinating if you ask me. The state of Hawaii, solid Democrat, joined by Colorado, which some people might not expect to be solid Democrat, but is rated as such. The margin here still wouldn't move it over into the safe column on my map, but it is just something to take in consideration based off of chance at victory. New Mexico, Michelle Lewin Grisham, as a likely D characterization here, has about a 78% chance of victory. I agree with that characterization, especially following the new numbers from the state. South Dakota, safe red. Nebraska, safe red. Kansas, surprisingly enough, still gives Laura Kelly about a 43% chance of victory and a loss of only about 1.3%. Now, this could be wrong. She's a Democrat in a red state in a red wave year, voted for President Trump by an overwhelming amount. I get it. But I also get what popularity can do for an incumbent. Laura Kelly is one of the most popular Democratic governors in the entire nation, and she hails from a red state. Andy Beshear in the state of Kentucky is the most popular Democratic governor in the nation. He comes from a Republican plus 30 state. Laura Kelly doesn't come from nearly as partisan of a Republican state, but she's still maintaining her level of popularity, and honestly, that should help her, which is why she probably has a 43% chance of victory. Not the worst place for her, and practically where I've had her on my map for the past couple of months. Looking at the state of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt defeats Josh Hoffmeister by a substantial amount. The reason why I mention that is because Hoffmeister is previously a Republican. She's the state superintendent, switched to the Democratic Party to challenge Kevin Stitt, had been a lifelong Republican. Nobody expected it, and yet it happened, and still, she only gets about 1/3 of the vote based off of expectation. So not at all a good look for Joy Hoffmeister, but realistically, this was probably the most she could do with her political career in such a solid red state as a Democrat. Moving down to Texas, though, this is a number and this is a result that surprised me, to say the least. Having a safe Republican characterization in a state that is typically competitive is quite shocking. Greg Abbott might have won back in 2018, but Donald Trump only won the state by 5.6%, and Abbott isn't exactly soaring in terms of level of popularity. I get it. Beto O'Rourke has made some comments against guns and against gun owners across the nation on his presidential bid in 2019 that won't help him in Texas. I'm not arguing that he's going to win, but based off of what I see, I don't know if this is compatible with a likely Republican characterization. The margin here might, but looking at the chance at victory, it might make sense, it might not. I think we're hovering somewhere around 90-10, but it was just surprising to see immediately straight off the bat that it's a solid R state. No polling data seem to indicate that, and I get it. We don't blindly trust the polls. I certainly do not. I think Greg Abbott will win by something that is nearing double digits, but to already put him in a position where he's at 14 points as a baseline is quite surprising to me, at least right now. Looking at the state of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, yes, the press secretary, the one that people made fun of on SNL, she's going to be the next governor from the state of sorry about that, I lost my voice. Arkansas. Moving up to Iowa, Kim Reynolds is going to win re-election easily. Tim Walz, surprisingly enough, some people were saying nope, Tim Walz is not going to win re-election, and I said, you know what, look at his approval rating. Look at the numbers. See what you find within the state, and you will see and agree with me that it's a likely decharacterization. That's exactly what we're seeing from 538. Wisconsin shocked me. When I say I saw this result and I said absolutely no way in heck is Wisconsin blue right now. Because the last time I had Wisconsin as blue isn't even characterized by this map. Because Wisconsin was one of the closest states. In fact, the third closest state in this presidential election in 2020. Joe Biden only won the state by 0.6%. It was so narrow it came down to 20,000 votes out of over 3 million cast. Looking at 2018, you also see that in a blue wave year, Tony Evers defeated Scott Walker by less than 2 points. But to head into 2022 with an advantage that is larger than some Democrats in states where I expect Democrats to do better, for instance, looking at this, Nevada or Arizona based off of where we are, Wisconsin gives, on 538, Tony Evers a 64% chance of victory versus Sisolak in Nevada at 58, Hobbs 45 in Arizona. I was just definitely caught off guard. But I can't say that this is something that is out of the ordinary. Tony Evers isn't exactly unpopular, and as is the standard rule of convention here, unpopular incumbents lose, but popular ones typically win, especially in governorships. As been said by many political pundits, it is very hard to convince voters to fire an incumbent who is popular. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen in Wisconsin. Just, I must have missed it. And honestly speaking, I did not expect to see that on this 538 characterization. Michigan, likely D. Gretchen Whitmer, a 91% chance of victory. I find it crazy. Not that it's likely D, because I 100% stand by that characterization, but I find it crazy that just months ago, Michigan was one of the top targets for the GOP in terms of pickup opportunities. They saw Pennsylvania, they saw Michigan, they saw Wisconsin. They thought they could have potentially gotten the three key states, yet 538 says absolutely not, especially in Michigan. Whitmer is a potential presidential contender in 24 or 28. I could honestly see her becoming president of the United States at one point in time. She reminds me a bit of Ron DeSantis, just a Democrat and a woman. It's interesting. 91% is likely to go down as Republicans sort of coalesce around Tudor Dixon or Ryan Kelly or whoever the Republican nominee might be. But as it stands right now, very good looks for the Democratic Party in the state of Michigan. And I can't say I'm super surprised knowing everything that is going on across that state. Pennsylvania, lean D. Josh Shapiro about a 73% chance of victory. This makes sense to me. You know, a 5-point victory in such a polarized environment, such an anti-Democrat environment, it makes sense. I think Josh Shapiro will win by something similar to this, or potentially more than this. I think Josh Shapiro definitely has the race right now in his column, but I can't say that I'm going to expect it to be this likely Democratic state at this point in time. Ohio, solid red. I've had it as lean. Looking at the margin here, they don't entirely agree with me. Mike DeWine probably is going to win re-election easily. Safe, I could be convinced. Anything beyond that, anything, you're talking a 30-point margin of victory, not necessarily practical, but I could be reasoned to an 18-point margin of victory upon further reflection. And I will likely take more time looking ahead into my future projections, especially taking in a model that I very highly respect on our national map. Illinois, safe D, makes sense. J.B. Pritzker, a very strong Democrat, similar to Whitmer, reminds me a little bit of Ron DeSantis, but I honestly don't think he will be president. I think Whitmer very well could be, or a very good VP pick. I'm not the one making that determination. The Democratic primary voters are, but definitely would keep these people in mind when you're thinking ahead. Looking at Tennessee, safe R, not at all competitive. Kay Ivey in Alabama, safe R, not at all competitive. Henry McMaster, as much as Democrats might have wanted this race to be competitive because Joe Cunningham was in the race, it simply isn't. 538 expects it to be over a 20-point victory. The reason why I'm a bit skeptical is because I'm looking back at past elections. 2018, South Carolina was decided by 8. 2014, South Carolina was decided by, guess what, 15 points, not 20 points as expected, or more than that. In fact, 2010, it was decided by 5. You go back, looking back at elections, 2006, decided by 10. 2002, decided by 6. Looking at our map here for 2022, I'm not super convinced it's going to be a 22-point margin of victory in a state that didn't even vote for President Trump by a solid margin. You're talking 12 points across the state. I'm not super impressed by Henry McMaster's performance, nor am I by his previous election performances. He very well could win. I just don't know if I buy 20-plus points across the state. But on my characterization, I've had it as likely red. Again, could be convinced to make it safe red, but I'm a bit skeptical about believing that 22-point margin expected. In the state of Georgia, though, I buy this. I buy that Brian Kemp has an 84% chance at victory. 7 points, maybe not. I think it might be slightly closer than that. But 4 or 5 points, absolutely. Brian Kemp has made it very clear. He ignored the efforts of President Trump to overturn the 2020 presidential election when Joe Biden won. That kept him in the good graces, whereas Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue were not in the good graces of suburban women across the Atlanta metro area, in addition to also many other voting groups, but many of which were not going to vote for him already. Looking at the numbers in polling in previous election history, Brian Kemp is an electable Republican. He has avoided the attempts of President Trump primarying him, and he has led in every single poll we have seen thus far, even the ones showing Raphael Warnock with a victory in the Senate race. Stacey Abrams is a good candidate, at least in terms of strategy and organizing, but it doesn't seem that Georgia voters want her in 2022. Though I could be completely proven wrong, Stacey Abrams at a 16% chance seems something that is close to believable, if not the actual percentage. We'll see what happens, though. I'm not going to speak for the race, but I do think that these numbers from 538 definitely make sense. Florida, safe red. I've been saying this. The margin here, well within the likely margin. You're talking 12 points. I buy that. I think it makes sense. The percent chance of victory, I also think makes sense. So moving on from Florida, let's go ahead and move up into some states that might not necessarily be expected to be voting the way that they are. For instance, the state of Maryland currently has a Republican incumbent, but Peter Franco, the incumbent comptroller across the state, essentially, if you're thinking about a treasurer or a state treasurer, someone who typically isn't elected but rather appointed by the governor, is elected in the state of Maryland, and we call it a comptroller. They deal with all of our money across the state. He is the expected Democratic nominee, even though he's only polling maybe 2-3 points ahead across the Democratic primary. It really is anyone's game at this point in time, but it's still Maryland. It's a safe blue state, and regardless of who the Republican Party nominates, it's going to be a pretty safe seat for the Democratic Party and almost an instantaneous pickup. In the state of New York, Kathy Hochul easily going to win re-election there, or her first true election across the state. In the state of Massachusetts, safe Democrat, another pickup for the Democratic Party. Charlie Baker was there before, not there anymore. Rhode Island, looking at the state, very safe for the Democratic Party. Daniel McKee going to win re-election there. And then you have Connecticut. What do you have? Well, I guess not re-election in Rhode Island, but that's a discussion for another video. Lieutenant Governor moving up. But Connecticut is likely Democrat. A little bit more surprising than maybe some people might have expected, but that's just the characterization. Vermont, New Hampshire, safe red states, not at all competitive for the Democratic Party, despite them being Democratic states in the past 4 elections. Interesting to say the least, but can't say it's entirely unexpected looking at those approval ratings. And then you have the final state, the state we haven't talked about much, but the state of Maine. And the reason why this is so interesting is because the incumbent here was the one who replaced the Republican nominee for governor, Paul LePage. The governor who was elected back in 2010, take a look at that. He won in the state of Maine in a red wave year. That led to him winning re-election 4 years later in also another red wave year. Then came a blue wave year, where Janet Mills won by 8 points against Sean Moody across the state. But now we're in 2022, a red wave year. But Democrats are still the very much favorites to win the Maine governorship. Janet Mills has a 75% chance of victory against Paul LePage. I think Paul LePage might have a slightly higher chance at victory. I've rated this state as a lean Democratic state for quite some time. I don't think I've had it as a likely state since even the beginning of my electoral projections. For a brief period of time, I had it flipping to Paul LePage. I don't think LePage is the right type of nominee considering Susan Collins, Olympia Snowe, the electoral history of Maine, he's gotten lucky twice and has gotten a lot more radically rightward since that 2014 election. And I can't say that I think that voters are excited to vote for him, but I also can't say that they're excited to vote for Democrats in general. This election is coinciding with two important House elections in Maine. The first district, which will be safe Dem, but the second district, which Republicans could flip from Jared Golden. Golden won in a district that Biden lost by 7 points, and he didn't exactly win by the narrowest of margins either. But it's a prime pickup opportunity for the GOP, and if they're fighting for that seat, they're certainly fighting for the governorship. Paul LePage could defeat Janet Mills, but I can't say that I expected him to have a lower chance of victory on the 538 average, but that's just simply how it is. Looking at this final map, 538 expects Democrats to actually pick up one seat from the Republican Party. Democrats lose Kansas, but they pick up the state of Wisconsin. They also pick up the state of Maryland. They pick up the state of Massachusetts. But they also, as a result, don't seem to be doing too well in the rest of these super important races. Look at Georgia. Look at Florida. Look at Texas. Look at Kansas. Look at Iowa. Look at Ohio. Look at Arizona. These are states that the Democratic Party very much was sure, at least previously, that they were going to win in, or at least be competitive in, that simply isn't happening right now. Ron DeSantis was one of the closest elections back in 2018, and now it's one of the most significant swing state Republican victories. It's very interesting looking at this map, seeing where we were just 4 years ago. It looks similar, but not exact to where we are. 27-23. Republicans still maintain their majority in the National Governors Association. They have most of the seats here in terms of the governorships, but in terms of population, what this actually does by the end of it is give the Democratic Party a higher percentage of America in terms of being governed by Democratic governors, more population under blue states than red states, at least when it comes down to governorships. Just all around a very interesting map that shows that maybe the count of the states doesn't matter as much as the population does. Something also to consider looking ahead to elections. Land doesn't vote, people do, same type of reasoning, same type of thinking, but of course that is also a topic for another video. So that's where 538 stands. I encourage you to check it out more on your own. There are also two other different iterations of the model, Light and Classic. Deluxe is the one that I trust the most because it takes into account expert forecasts, polling data, demographic data, election history, everything you can think of. But if you want to do a little bit more simplistic or a little bit more surface level, you can take a look at the other two models because they are also very informative and tell you a bit about where the polls are saying it's going to go, or maybe where the election history is saying it's going to go. Definitely worthwhile to take a look at, but not necessarily the most trustable, at least in my opinion. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.